Running Sentences presents The Lost Adventures of a Maybe Hero, Part 10. One Step Closer to Fighting. Leonardo discovers much about his parents, and much about the upcoming war between the government heroes and the mob-led heroes, and also that he really wants no part of this now. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and incidences within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real incidences, real situation, real jobs, real businesses, and or fictional businesses, events, characters, people, and so on, is purely coincidental. Copyright 2022, Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. The word "things are bad" was ringing in Leonardo's ears. She sounded so dispassionate about the situation, and it was getting to him. He couldn't understand it. A superhero was about to fall down upon them, and it was merely a shrugged about, it happens kind of thing from the person that was supposed to be his mother. He felt himself getting woozy in his legs, and his legs were beginning to buckle. As he tried to move a bit, but it just didn't work. It only lasted a second, though, and he steeled himself as best he could. There would be no motherly care if he were to suddenly take sick and fall over, so best not to do that. She would probably look over at him, disappointed by him for having fallen over. It was already there from the look in her eyes. "Come in, all of you. There is some stuff to talk about, I suppose." The group shuffled forward, entering the house one by one, with Leonardo being the last one inside. They were sent to a living room that was done up with pastel colors, and there were a few chairs to sit on. The three all chose the sofa and settled in as Rachel disappeared off to do something. Minutes went by before a man appeared with the help of a cane and made his way into this room. Charlotte was up to help him in an instant. "Dad, you shouldn't be up with your legs." "We have guests and important ones from what your mother told me. Hello, wise one." A sharp look came from the man, who eyed Roger, and then his eyes fell upon Leonardo. There was, to Leo, a look of sadness in this man's eyes that followed by a headshake of no. "Why do you come to find me and my wife?" "Oh, it's just the mob acting up, trying to get the old war going against Charles, or Wise One, using all of us to get what they want. All while the government does its bit of the same, but we weren't really in this whole war until he showed up." Roger pointed towards Leonardo with his thumb, who, for his part, did his best to disappear into the couch. The feeling of being unwanted was strong here, and he didn't know why. "Your son, by the way, has lost memories and no superpowers potentially, but he was out wandering the world, and since he was dealing with that and he wanted to know who his parents were, it only made sense to find you." "He was not out wandering the world. Leonardo was supposed to be safely tucked away from it." "Dad, you actually know you are actually father to this person? Why don't I remember any of this? We look about the same age." "You mean he was supposed to be closely watched by the mob, Charles? That was the deal you made with them, right?" There was a flash of anger from the man, who tossed aside his cane. He stood his full height and glared. His daughter backed away from him, looking confused and lost, and Leonardo felt for her, but still, the couch seemed like a safe space right now. Drawing attention to himself seemed like it would wind up with an angry soup in his face. So he sort of melted once again, as far back into the couch as he could. Really, right now, all he wanted to do was get out of here. He wasn't wanted, and, well, dealing with the mob right now sounded like a better option than whatever this was. "I did that to protect the one child we knew didn't have powers for sure. We didn't want harm to come to Charlotte." "Oh, a goody two-shoes story, Charles. Really? How terrible of a parent do you have to be leave behind one kid?" It wasn't easy, but it was a choice that we made. That or we might have had to fight them. Our powers are far too diminished to be able to hold our own against new soups." The woman, claiming to be Rachel, had come back and moved to stand behind Charles. She too stared at Leonardo for a hard second before concentrating on Roger. "We aren't what we used to be. Our powers are used up." Why was no one going to tell me any of this? And you still haven't told me why I don't remember Leonardo here. I don't remember him. Why don't I know him?" Charlotte pointed towards Leonardo, and then backed away from her mother, who held out a hand to try and calm her. To Leonardo, it looked like Charlotte was starting to glow. He shook his head and sunk deeper into the sofa. Safety was first, he thought. He was not here anymore. "One of the mob's heroes has the ability to wipe minds. We felt it was for the best to clean out what didn't need to be known, Charlotte. Plus, it gives us much-needed chance to retire from being heroes. We simply couldn't do it anymore. Charles and I were just worn out. The chance came and we took it." There's plenty in Leonardo's mind that was trying to fit in with all of this new information. A whole puzzle seemed to have been dumped on him, but he could get a sense that something was still missing. There were too few pieces to this. Jeeves, the bent forges, where was all of that in this? But the bigger thing to him was, dare he open his mouth to say anything or something to these people? It didn't seem like these two wanted him around, and since he had some kind of powers or something, but he wasn't sure about that. Excuse me, but what about Jeeves?" It came out a bit squeakish, and he wasn't sure he had been heard, but he put it out there, and Rachel was now looking at him. Or was she his mother? He'd felt a connection at the old house, but now it all felt cold, and that dusty line and smell was all gone. "We hired Jeeves to look after you and keep you away from us. Your blood was tainted by a bad strain of DNA, and we didn't know what it might do to our precious daughter." Leonardo looked towards Charlotte, who seemed to be quite in an angry mood, and he swore that she had a small ball of fire in her hand, but no one seemed to see that besides him. "Roger, do you know anything about such things?" "I only knew of one scientist who worked for my team and could analyze the differences between superhero blood and regular blood and DNA and what was and what wasn't. He was dead before you were born, though, so the mob would be the ones to tell them any such information." "And what if the mob told them the wrong information, Roger? Say that they saw that the daughter had powers and that the son did not, but they wanted to keep a close eye on the girl because they could use the girl." Roger, Charles, and Rachel all slowly looked towards Charlotte, who had not calmed down. She was glowing, and a small ball of fire had grown from a golf ball to a baseball-sized problem. It was Leonardo who was first to jump in. "Charlotte, you're right to be angry at these people, but I do fear that you might burn your clothes or yourself if you keep that ball of flames so close to you." That Leonardo had spoken to her broke through the frustration and anger. She wasn't used to this, and she paused, shaking her head, with the glow on the flames vanishing. There was a pause of another few seconds as she studied her hand, which now had a lot of blackened soot on it. He, however, took the chance to get off the sofa and went towards the young lady. She glanced up at him, but was not bothered by his appearance by her side, but she did close herself off a bit and take a minor step back and closed her hand. Leonardo kept to himself and didn't try and touch her, or fearing he might set her off again. Instead, he looked to his parents, who both seemed rather shocked by this development. The device, the little helper, was out of his pocket and pointed towards them. "You want out of this, right?" His parents looked towards him, concerned and surprised. They looked like they'd been hit by a lot of news all at once, which he was not sympathetic about, but at the same time, it served them right. Perhaps you can hold on for a few seconds, Leonardo. Why don't you two kids go to the kitchen while I try to find out if your stolen device might be of some use here in helping your parents do what they want." "Stolen device?" advice? See, I told you, Charles, I knew something wasn't right about him. Leonardo did his best to not just press the button and be done with all of this. Even though he wasn't sure the thing did anything, it would feel nice to press it and feel like he was doing something. There was a hand, however, that tugged at his arm, and he saw a pleading look from Charlotte, who seemed lost and dazed and wanted to be elsewhere. Perhaps, Charlotte, you could show me to your kitchen, and I can get a drink, and you can get a much-needed drink of water to help calm down. She nodded and began walking out of the room. The kitchen was but a few feet away from the living room, but it took a roundabout way to get there. Charlotte had let go of his arm and seemed depressed from the way her shoulders had slumped over, and the fact that she was now staring at the ground. He wished he could do something for her, but he instead stopped in the doorway to the kitchen. "Hello!" The strange voice snapped Charlotte out of her stupor, and she, too, stopped just in time. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see how you were getting along. You popped into odd locations, and I suspected, since Dad came here from time to time, you might show up. I am, however, still a bit angry at you for the whole mountainside fiasco." "What happened there, by the way?" "I believe factions within the mob who have control of heroes decided they wanted more control, or maybe the heroes who were not in control wanted control. That's kind of what I caught on to anyway, or heard parts of anyway. Didn't want to risk my neck too much, so I fled before I learned a lot. Or my neck was put in a vice-like grip. They were still hunting for us after all." "Who are you?" Catalina looked over at Charlotte, then raised her eyebrows at the young woman before taking a look at Leonardo. She pointed towards the woman and then towards him. Her hand went back and forth a few times before coming to a stop. He wasn't sure if it was a look of disbelief on her face or not, but it was certainly a surprise to her. "She looks an awful lot like you, Leonardo. Is she related to you? Is this where your parents were? Dad never did let me come in here." "We might be related to one another. Charlotte, this is Catalina, who is daughter to the butler Jeeves, and, back and forth. Catalina, this is Charlotte, Catalina, you got the whole idea." Catalina, who had been sitting on the counter in the kitchen, jumped off of it and strolled over, offering her hand to Charlotte to look confused. There was a lot of reticence before she took it. "Hi?" "Yes, hi. Welcome to the madhouse that surrounds this young man." "Says the terrible thief who got caught by the government." "How'd you know that?" "I heard it through a grapevine by a man named Roger, who works for the government, and says that you work for him and have for quite a while. Also, something about helping them start up the fight between the mob and the government. And what about your dad? He might be working with her, or my parents. I guess they are my parents. Maybe they are my parents. And the whole mob." Leonardo waved his hand towards Charlotte, who moved to take a seat at the table. All of this was getting to her, and she looked rather pale and sickly. Catalina made a face at him and went over towards her and knelt down. "You feeling okay?" "No, I am not." "Yeah, I wouldn't either. So much going on, and the world seems to have new problems up its sleeve at every turn. Like having powers that you didn't know about, or your parents turn out to be massive, giant liars, or that all of this has been set up by... Catalina took a few steps back and stood up when she heard this. The small glow had returned and was coming off of Charlotte once again. The woman seemed both on the verge of tears and rage. "Yeah, freshly discovered the mob may have lied and made everyone think that I had superpowers, but Charlotte here did not, if it turns out we are related. Turns out, people lie, and the opposite of what everybody thought to be true might be not true, or whatever the saying is anymore. I don't know." "Oh, well, that's not good for one's sanity." "Yeah, now perhaps you might answer a few of the questions I put to you." Yes, Dad. I don't know what he's been getting up to. I have been away for a while before I ran into the government. I will say that he does unusual jobs protecting people and keeping them away from society. I don't know who pays him to do that, but he has done it a few times, for different companies, I believe." Charlotte was taking a few deep breaths in the background to calm herself down as she got up from the chair. "Tell me what is going on with this Jeeves." Leonardo shot a look to Catalina, a shrug, which he returned. With a deep breath, the two shared his story, and a bit of hers, though not as much so hers. Jumping in and out, telling in between one another how his life is going so far. It took a few minutes, but by the end, Charlotte nodded at it. "Okay, so what are your plans now? Are you guys going to go fight these heroes?" There was a furious headshake no from Leonardo, who was also screwing up his face. He did not want to fight when he didn't have a single superpower that he knew of. "Well, I don't think we have much of a choice, even if you don't want to, Leonardo." He shrugged and was not surprised that she noticed. "The mob will probably soon be here since they like to protect what is theirs." "Yeah, but I can't fight. And what can you do, Catalina? Please tell me that you don't have superpowers and are going to help out this government business event thing situation." "I do not have powers." Leonardo squinted his eyes, trying to judge out whether or not this was true or not. "Are you just saying that?" There was a heavy crash from outside, towards the backyard. All three of them jumped and looked in that direction, hoping not to see a superpowered villain, hero, person outside. And to their surprise, there was actually not. It was a rather large branch lying across the lawn from a nearby tree. It looked snapped from where they stood, crowding around the back door. The sound of footsteps from the front of the house drew them to look over and see that Roger, followed by Charlotte's parents, had come in. Leonardo decided that they were her parents more than his, so this fit. "What was that noise?" "Hello, Roger. It seems a branch from a tree is in the lawn, and since it looks nice out there and not like it's going to have a giant storm suddenly coming out, I'm guessing it is a warning that we are not alone." "Well then, there are choices that have to be made. Catalina, you and Leonardo ought to head out to see what it was." Roger sighed, and kept going as he cast glances between Charlotte and the other two parental superheroes. "I will come out there to distract them in a second. As for Charlotte, or you two, it is up to you to find which side you want to fight on." To Leonardo's surprise, Catalina went right for the door, and along with her went Charlotte. His mind reeled, trying to sort itself out, and what it wanted to know was what he was supposed to do out there. He figured that since it was established that he didn't have any powers, that he was going to be useless. At least, maybe, hopefully, something would come along. Maybe Roger would give him some hint as to how to use his little useless clickers thing. But no, Roger seemed intent on staring at Charlotte's parents, he reminded himself, and for whatever reason, his legs were following the two young women out the door. The sky out here had turned dark and cloudy, with a drizzle of rain here and there. Leonardo stepped out and looked about. The two women were in front of him, and he had his clicker back in his hand, out ready to not be the slightest bit useful. He figured that's all he had going for him in this moment. What's the plan, Catalina?" "We find out who destroyed part of a tree and why. What else would we be doing out here?" Catalina took a few more steps forward towards the branch and the back of the fenced-in yard. She only made it a few steps before a new branch flew out from the woods behind the yard and landed a few feet away. Leonardo jumped in surprise at the suddenness of it and looked hard to see what he could see. There was nothing really there, which annoyed him. Why the mystery? Didn't the villains want to fight them? "All right, stop messing about." Leonardo jumped again, this time from hearing Charlotte shout out. His nerves now frayed in a new direction as he awaited the inevitable squishing by a hero that was going to come to him. "I do wonder if they are messing about." Catalina's calm voice helped ease Leonardo a little bit, but then a sudden figure jumped out from the woods and landed on the lawn. Dust kicked up around the landing spot, obscuring them from view. But for once, Leonardo did not feel afraid of whoever was across from him. No, he had the feeling that this was not going to be a fight. "I came here at the request of Roger." The voice came from the dust, which had just about begun to clear. He could see a young woman who was vaguely familiar to him. Who she was he couldn't place at this exact second, but there was that look of someone he'd seen before. He thought about this as Catalina stepped forward. "You're certainly a showy one. Have you defected sides?" "As per the request of Roger, I've made my departure known to his enemies, the mob, and then found out where he was." The dust had now cleared and revealed a spandex-looking superhero who looked still very vaguely familiar. Pardon me, but, Catalina seems to know you, and I don't, but, how did you find us? Or how did you find Roger?" "While I am a hero, that does not prevent me from using a phone. You know, Masked Butler, it isn't that hard to know people, and having agreed to work with them, to get a location of where one might be. Took a little extra work, but I found where I needed to go to." He nodded, sorry he interrupted, but felt like it helped him in some way, like having the voice directed at him helped loosen something in his mind. "Oh, you're the one who helped kidnap me." "Yes, I did help with that. Good of you to remember that. Now where is Roger?" Leonardo with his thumb pointed towards the house, as Roger had finally just come out. The agent nodded when he saw the collection of people and made his way towards them. Well, if it isn't my lovely double agent. How are you?" "Niceness will only get you so far, sir, and the comment isn't on the nice side of things." Apologetically, Roger began nodding, and then came over towards Leonardo, taking the clicker from his hand. He began fiddling with it while looking at Bethany. "I know you want to be a hero, and I get a bit defensive for no good reason, and when approached by mob people to do things. But here we are now, and you did as I asked, correct?" "Yes, the mob all know what you wanted them to know, but not at this location are we going to have this rumble of a tumble of a fight." "Oh, well, pity. I was hoping they'd just come to me and we'd get it all over with. I probably saw that as a trap, though." "Kind of was. But I guess we have to go to them." "Where are they?" "The old Dust Town mine." "Ah, yes, where Leonardo said they were keeping him during his kidnapping. How nice, and, Catalina, I believe, also knows that place as well. Yes, well, perhaps we should all get a move on towards there, okay? And even if it isn't okay, you're all coming along." The man had begun to turn away again. "What is the point of in me going, or Catalina even? We don't have powers. She claims she doesn't have powers. I claim I don't have powers. Why are we going?" "No, you apparently don't, Leonardo, but you are a key to the whole thing for some reason. Why did the mob hide you away, even though, as you claim, you don't have those powers? They aren't the type of people to waste resources on such things, and they could just eliminate you. They saw something in their reports about you that they could use, and they want to use you, so you get to come along." So what about all of that?" Roger finally paused, rubbing his temples, frustrated and annoyed. "Listen, if you aren't there, they're going to come find you and use you to build themselves back up, or whatever is left of them, should we defeat them, of course. And if they defeat the government, then they will just still search you out, because they apparently want you for something. They think there's something in you that they want to use against others. Criminals do not stop simply because you have run away, and especially powerful criminals do not stop." Catalina waved the group away and went over towards Leonardo, gently grabbing him by the arm. He was led a bit a ways from them as the group went towards the house. She brought him towards the side of a fence. "I know you don't want to do this, and that everyone has been lying to you for a long time, leading you to suspect that the world is out to get you. Well, it is, as it is for most people, but not in the way if that makes sense." He thought for a second, trying to get over the sentence to make sure that it made sense in his mind. It kind of did, so he shook his head no. Why would I go along with all of this, Catalina? I can't help. All I would be able to do is stand around and be a distraction, and I don't think that's okay. You were the one who wanted to be a hero, and now you have a chance at it. Well, yeah, but I mean, that was to get away. Wait a second. Do we step back? Like, however long ago it was, you, Catalina, made me look like a bad guy by me stopping that robbery at the bank, so I was not really a hero. You exposed people doing bad things, and I came in and stopped that. Well, yes and no, you did. It wasn't bad for you to stop the gang, because we were stealing, although it was to give to the poor, and it was just happenstance that we uncovered some fuckery by the government and the mob, doing businesses where they shouldn't be doing business, but you did stop us after we uncovered a bad, worse crime, so I suppose you're a sort of grey hero, one caught in the middle who may or may not have powers to make them a superhero. Look, just come along, and when we do the whole confrontation thing, you can run away. No one will question it, everybody will be fighting, everybody will be caught up in whatever it is we're doing, and you can just run. As he was thinking about this, though, he felt himself being pulled towards the house. You know, I can't help but think it would have been easier just to have a superpowered person threaten me. Oh, I hadn't thought of that, actually. Bit surprised that Roger didn't go to that, but I think it is best that we just go to this mine and find out what we're facing. A group of cars took off from the home of Charles and Rachel. At first, it was 3 cars with Catalina, Roger, and Leonardo in one. Charlotte was following in her car with Bethany sitting in it. Then in the back, somewhat further back, were the 2 supposed parents driving a little slower. It, however, did not end there as the drive went. They were soon joined by a variety of black, sleek-looking vehicles, and a few military-looking ones to round it all out. Leonardo had stopped counting after about the 5th one joined them, and just watched the roads slip by as they made their way. A familiar place came into view for Leonardo, and it took him a few seconds to realize where they were when they pulled off the road and into a small parking lot. It didn't really click until they drove past the parking lot onto a road that had plenty of hairpin turns that they were climbing up. They'd arrived at the mountain and the mine, which sent him into a bit of a panic. He didn't really want to be here, and the closer and closer they got to the top, the less likely it would be he could actually get away. Leonardo tried to calm himself by breathing deeply and hoping that something would happen by freak accident, and the whole thing would be called off. Unlikely, but he had to hope for something, otherwise what to do? What could he do? The road had come to an end, and they were soon at where the mine entrance lay. The vehicles were all soon parked, with everyone getting out and milling around. The military-looking people all went to secure the perimeter, while everyone else stood about the place. Leonardo was leaning against the back of Roger's car, waiting for anything to happen. Roger did come by at one point and dropped the thumbstick clicker drive thing back into his hands. That should work now. Should it? I mean, it does nothing. Yes, it should. Why? I had a thought, and I remember while being stuck down in the mine that my captors turned on something that switched off the hero's power. It seemed like it was a big machine. I was making a bit of a racket. This is a small little thing. It's not really going to do anything, is it? Did you see the device that you were talking about? Leonardo shook his head no, and Roger shook his head yes. Yeah, it might seem a bit bigger than ours, but when we stole their designs, we had our scientists work hard on it to get it down to that small thing. Don't worry, I'm sure it will work as advertised, hopefully. The agent drifted off to tend to something else, leaving Leonardo with this in his hand. He took a moment to look it over and then stuffed it back into his pocket, then took a few steps away towards the side of this plateau where the mine entrance stood. His thoughts were now to try and find the fastest escape route out of here. A slow circle about the place showed the only place that did not really steeply drop off was the twisted, hairpinned road. Leonardo gulped and made another lap around and was surprised to find Catalina had joined him at some point. planning something. Escape, as you pointed out, for when things go badly. Not just looking at escape, but when things go badly. Does it matter when the escape happens? And anyway, I don't see your escape among the chaos when we were here. How did you get off of this mountainside? She pointed off towards the side where a grove of trees had managed to occupy some ground on the side of the mountain. The two began moving towards it. The ground over there isn't as steep because of the trees, but it takes one with a lot of balance to be able to stay upright on that ground. Otherwise you go end over end. She nodded, he sighed, and looked back towards the road. That was the only real way to escape, but it would be covered heavily by pretty much anyone who also was trying to escape or just guard it. What are you two doing? Planning his escape, Charlotte. Why? Why is Leonardo planning to escape? We have to fight the heroes. Because what powers do I have, Miss Charlotte? How can a simple bug of a human survive against those with superhuman strength or whatever it is that they have? Well, Mom and Dad did say you had powers, and Roger seems to believe it as well. I did talk to him, and he seems to think it's true. She pointed towards the center of the plateau, where her parents stood. We should go talk to them, see what they say, and before you say no, it can't hurt to find out even if you don't have powers. He grumbled, but moved towards her parents. She was right in that it wouldn't hurt to know this supposed power. And what was wrong with a little more information? The trio moved towards Rachel and Charles, both of whom were staring at the scarred ground about the place. Charlotte coughed lightly to get them to turn. Yes, darling, what is it? Your son is looking for more information about his life. I think it is only right that you tell him something about it. After all, you did abandon him. Is it right? What about it makes it right? He was going to harm us and you, and we couldn't have that. Well, perhaps the person who claims to be my dad, if you could tell me more about what that problem is, then I would actually know why you're so scared of me, and, I could get some understanding as to what's going on. There was a shared look between Charles and Rachel as they both silently communicated with one another. Leonardo tried to figure out what the looks meant, but they were quick, and Rachel had soon turned to face him again. What the mob report showed us was that you had a power that would end the world. If you got angry, you could make lava rise up from the Earth's core and consume the land. A super volcano would erupt, basically, and in many places, dooming us and the world to darkness. We could not take that risk, Leonardo. We had a choice of letting you destroy the world by making you angry or to keep everyone safe. We have life to think about and other people to think about, and being the end cause of the end didn't really appeal to us. As parents, we were simply trying to do the right thing. So your grand plan was to send me away and hope that I never get angry. I hate you for all of this. And how can you even call yourselves parents? What would you have done if both of us had powers, And anyway, that doesn't sound like a superpower, but a doomsday device. What else was said about me? Do not take that tone with us. That tone with you, Miss Rachel? Miss Superhero? With you? The same tone you've had with me this entire time, and all I want to do is figure out what's going on with me. What made me so special for all of this to happen? Fuck off with your attitude. You don't want to tell me things? Fine, but don't give me shit for trying to find out what I can't even apparently control. Leonardo flicked off Rachel and then turned his finger towards Charles. Catalina and Charlotte had both grabbed one of his arms each and pulled Leonardo back a few steps. He didn't resist, just letting them pull as he stared at Charles and Rachel, two people who he could no longer consider as his parents. Why bother with all of this when they simply could have killed him? You do owe your child that much, you two. At least tell him what he needs to know before it all goes to hell. Language, Roger. We don't like hearing that kind of language. There was a sigh from Charles. At this point, it doesn't matter, Rachel. Language is just another thing these people do and don't care about. The two women at Leonardo's sides had increased their grip on his arms. He wasn't going to attack. His former parents, Rachel's parents, they still had some powers, and you couldn't really fight that, so... But it felt nice to have someone holding him back, someone who was at least a little concerned about him. Though he reminded himself that might be because of the world-ending worry, instead of just about him anymore. Fine. Leonardo, your power was to gather energy, which, when angry, could set off events. The energy could be anything, we were told, from atoms in the air to loose fragments of static from clothes and so on. Yes, as Charles says, and to exemplify what we were talking about, a year before the incident where we wiped your memories, there was a small fire in your bedroom. No one knew what caused it, but we suspected it was loose energy gathering around you and concentrated on something that had annoyed you. It was then that we decided we needed to act, because we couldn't protect you or anyone. Every step of the way, you cooperated with us, by the way. Told us it would be okay to do this, that if we have the option, we should take it to protect ourselves. Leonardo was a bit stunned and took it in his mind, thinking over this matter. This mob person doctor who did this test told me this personally? Yes, he did, son. Leonardo felt the itch in the back of his mind. He looked towards Charlotte, trying to place it all together, and if he had to guess, it sounded like he'd been covering for her. But was it that simple? Did he really do it for her, to protect her, potentially? She was also looking at him, and seemed to be thinking much the same thing he was. There was still something about this that was bothering him, though. It was me who did it, wasn't it? Well, yes, actually, Charlotte, we did suspect that as well, but ruled it out after checking with our mob science person. Your powers weren't manifesting at that time. There was a silence that fell over as everyone was considering what was being said. And then Leonardo had a sudden thought. Quick diversion before we go back deep into what happened. How long were you with this mob, and how long were you and the mob dealing with one another? It was an ongoing thing about 6 years ago. Or was it 7? I don't recall the exact years past, but even Roger here will tell you that the government and the mob regularly talked to one another. Yeah, that is true up until you two disappeared. We talked to the other side to try and stop silliness from happening, like trying to stop a superhero war, and trying to get an inside edge on information on them so we could stop anything from happening. It was and remained a game of cat and mouse between us. And one other thing, the whole company, the Bent Forges, what was that? It was our business that we used as a cover for our superpowers. Can't have people running around thinking that superheroes are running a business. Or, well, it was, no, it wasn't. I think most people put 2 and 2 together about us, since we didn't wear masks when we were out saving the world. Did we, darling? Charles had wrapped his arm around Rachel and looked at her rather lovingly. Leonardo felt the look that those two were sharing as she looked back at Charles, like those two were going down a trip to memory lane, and a lovey-dovey one. He didn't want to be aboard that, so he looked about and at the sky. Shouldn't that other group be here by now? This was where Bethany had said they would be, but there was nothing here. And then, as if to answer his thought, a few small dots in the sky began to approach at high speed. I think our other heroic villains have arrived. Roger, anybody? The others joined him in looking skyward as the dots became human-shaped. Then came to a stop above them a group of 6 flying men and women, all of them holding on to another hero in their arms. The group then began to descend, hovering slowly as a few people got out of the way from below them. When they were close to the ground, they dropped the heroes from their arms, and then landed themselves. Well, 12 against a few, not bad numbers for us. Roger seemed to pace about the place as he said this, and tried to hide amongst the crowd. "Bethany, why have you gone to their side?" Hugo had stepped out from behind the pack towards the front, ignoring Roger's comments. This hero walked straight over towards this other female hero who had kidnapped Leonardo, and she had her arms crossed, looking rather displeased to see Hugo. "Why do you think, idiot, I don't want to rob people or do menial jobs that involve keeping others in a place that they don't want to be? It was bullshit through and through. I'm done with that life." "No one is ever done with it." This hero moved forward again, and everyone moved back to give him space. Both sides did not want to be near him. Roger then emerged a little bit from the crowd. "You are Hugo, I take it, sir. I am Roger, agent in charge of the government side of matters. I've heard that there may have been, a change in higher-ups within the mob. Or were we misled?" With a puffed-out chest, Hugo stepped over towards Roger, towering over him and glaring down at him. The crowd around Roger had dissipated a little bit, and the height difference between the two was but an inch, and Hugo was floating to make sure that the difference was felt, although it was still an inch, so they were probably about the same height. And though Leonardo, judging from where he was, could see the difference probably wasn't as great as he was trying to pretend it was. "You, sir, are the one who created this mess, agent person?" "No, I am not. Not that I am aware of anyone. One could argue I had a hand in it, and that I positioned my unit of the government as a deterrent to the mob, and that created this mess. But I did not try and create a war between two sides. I did want to use heroes to stop people from doing bad things, and you are on the opposite end of that, so I suppose yes and no." It was hard to tell if this villainous hero believed Roger or not, as he floated away, this time headed straight for Leonardo, who stared at him in return. The clicker was firmly in hand, but he stuffed that hand into a pocket. He didn't want to give away that he had it. His mind had done this unconsciously, and had switched over to fearing that he'd been standing here for too long, and now it was too late to get away. This hero was in front of him, and didn't seem like he wanted to move on. "You escaped our clutches and caused massive damages to our facility. That wasn't very nice of you, Master Butler. Therefore I propose a trade. This Leonardo Damien returns to us, and we both go back into hibernation. How does that sound, Roger?" "Wait a second." Leonardo stepped a little bit forward. "What if I refuse to go along with all of this?" "You don't have a say in it, you bug." Hugo had then turned towards Roger, who was scratching his face with a finger and seemed to be considering this offer. This surprised Leonardo, who felt like he'd been stabbed in the back by the government agent. It should be a simple no, right? Then reminded himself of the comic books he'd read, and all the talk between his parents and Roger and everyone else about how this agent could do whatever he thought was best for him or the people or the government or whatever went through his mind. "Before I say yes to this trade offer, or no, we need some details to make a sound decision. Okay?" "I'm not okay with it, but you're going to ask your questions and wrangle spies into the midst of the organization and find out what you want anyway, so ask away. I may not answer." "Are you the new boss of the mob family, Fred?" A heavy shrug rolled off of the super's shoulders. If one looked at it in a certain way, it could perhaps be considered a yes. Leonardo was one such person, since there really was no other way to take this shrug, and unless someone else showed up, it felt like the right thing to do. And since he was now being threatened with removal, Leonardo, to his own surprise, found himself pulling the little contraption from his pocket and held it up. "Hugo, what happened to the other heroes?" "You mean the ones we were keeping safe from everyone, including themselves? Safe and sound back in their little home." "Is that your little device that you had the other day? It doesn't work." "What is it again?" Yes, it is. Supposedly, according to the government, it will take the same knockout power effect that was set off in the cave that one time I was there. Shall we test to see if that is true? Leonardo wasn't sure where this sudden surge of confidence had come from, but he kinda liked it. Well, it was fun at least, since usually he could do nothing but run off to the side. That technology inside the cave never worked. We merely made a lot of noise, and the placebo effect worked wonders on those idiots inside. Oh. Hugo glanced over at Roger, who'd made the noise. That should certainly make things interesting when Leonardo hits that button. We'll do something, hopefully. Probably. Definitely do something. Don't know what then. The air had suddenly gone stiff from a cold breeze that blew through, and everyone was now centered their attention on Leonardo. Would he or wouldn't he hit the button on this thing that was supposed to turn off powers? Leonardo took a few steps away from the supers in front of him so that they would have to work to grab him, or at least take the sudden emergency steps to try and do something. They all, however, seemed to be frozen in place. What exactly does it do, Mr. Agent? I said I don't know. We designed it to turn off powers, it was designed to turn off the powers in superheroes. But since you said that doesn't work, we don't really know. Why don't we all find out then, eh? With a shrug, Leonardo hit the button on the fob thingy, and things suddenly went very black. End of part 10 of The Lost Adventures of Maybe Hero. Thank you for listening.